G'day and welcome to another edition of the Aussie Ideas Man. I'm going to show my face again this time. Hopefully I won't be too slow at editing it and skipping all the pregnant pauses that I make. The Critten's done 3 parts, so I figured I'll do 3 parts too. This will be the last of it. The interview's over after this one. This one's very interesting to me because there's the Laffy motors being discussed briefly and the skin cooling, or that belly pan as he calls it, which I, from day one, ever since I first saw this silly trike, have said should not work and has never proven to work. Well, it gets very interesting, so let's get into it.
Okay, this is part 3. We talk about Alafe, belly cooling, valuation, repairs, all kinds of stuff. Okay. Now we kind of mentioned how other EV companies, we won't mention any names, but took billions of dollars to get to production, and these same EV companies are having financial problems because they're losing money even though they are producing and selling vehicles at this time. Just because like the whole, I guess, I don't understand it myself, but I guess they're just spending more money than they're able to make, and the ramp to production doesn't get them enough revenue to stay above water. Does APTERA have a strategy that's different that maybe will avoid those problems, or can you see what I'm getting at?
No, look, the whole way that APTERA builds this vehicle
Uh-huh.
different than how other people do it. We have less than 10 parts for the big. We have so many fewer tools.
I'm going to remind people that in the last couple of videos I've been saying that they never answer a question. They're worse than politicians. If you actually remember each question as it's asked, and with every sentence that they make, think, did that answer that question? And you'll find that they will rant on a long time each time and steer you away from answering the question. They will give you irrelevant diversions. That's all. And they continue to do this. I've noticed that. I've watched it once, and they continue to do this. It's the same old snake oil every time.
We have almost an order of magnitude lower tooling cost.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything about how we build this vehicle, how we will launch production, requires far less capital by design, because we made the vehicle that way. We set out to make it that way. Now, if we had set out to build a conventional steel vehicle with all of the attendant parts and things necessary on the assembly line, then we would have had to raise billions of dollars as well to get it in production. But we purposefully chose not to go that route. We leveraged all of Chris's thinking from his boat manufacturing history, and our collective experience together to say we have to find a different way. We have to find a way that needs orders of magnitude less capital.
Yeah, no paint, bonded assemblies, reduced parts, simplistic, sub-assemblies that are easy to put together. All that adds to something that's just much different than traditional automotive. And I would say that, Steve and I are big fans of the EV world and community. And, we think it's amazing that, these companies are delivering such compelling electric vehicles now, really cool looking vehicles, stylish looking vehicles, fast, capable, whatever you want to say. So it's amazing to see the EV world growing so much. I think it's terribly unfair that the market has punished so many of them when EV sales are up and people are excited about this. But the market dynamics are something that Steve nor I control. So that's just how it is. But we didn't approach this from a traditional automotive perspective. We approached this from how do we get the most reliable, capable solar mobility on the road. And we sought out amazing partners like Sandy Monroe and CPC and CT&S. And all of these guys have given us little different ways to be able to reduce our CapEx, to build this vehicle in a much different way than traditional automotive has, and to just really kind of do things much differently. We're starting a whole new vehicle segment here with a whole new vehicle production program. And we think it's better for the environment, we think it's better for the world, and we think it helps us deliver on our promise much more quickly.
Is there like a number that you need to reach before you start becoming like self-sufficient? Like, is it 10,000 vehicles a year, 20,000 vehicles a year, 100,000 vehicles a year?
You asked our wonderful VP of Finance, Blake, he would say very specifically that number is 6,000 vehicles a year.
Oh, a year.
Why don't we find out where Blake has said this? That'd be interesting. Let's see if the cretin can do that research and go, well, let's look at the source. Where did Blake say this? 6,000 vehicles? And what was his reasoning for 6,000 vehicles?
Okay, that's like seems like a very doable number.
Right.
Yeah, at 6,000 vehicles a year, we're self-sustaining, we're happy, we're doing everything we need to do to.
And we can do that because we're not trying to amortize billions of dollars of tooling.
Uh-huh.
And to do that, we have to produce tens, hundreds of thousands of vehicles a year.
Uh-huh. So if you're producing like 20,000 vehicles a year, you guys are now making money.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay. That's really good to hear. All right. So then now that, you know, when you're talking about the bonded pieces, that reminded me of a question someone had. Like that bonding mechanism that's used at CPC, does that require some kind of like heating or curing method with light? You just apply it and it's just time.
It's like, you know, an epoxy bond, but it's not an epoxy bond. It's more sophisticated than that.
Okay.
And, you know, they've been doing this for years at CPC, you know, making high performance bodies for the world's most extravagant supercars.
Yep.
So, you know, the bonding adhesion work that they've been doing is amazing. And the bond is stronger than the part. So when the parts fail, it's not the fails, it's the part that fails.
In the rare instance where we use a bonded stud, you know, it is a UV bonded stud.
Uh-huh.
The whole idea to have all of this design into the bink is so that you don't have to do that. The part comes out with those bosses and threaded inserts in it. So there's no adding parts like that in production. It's already built into the part.
Okay.
Buddy that's in Paris right now looking at our beautiful bink assembly there, you know, look at some of the inserts that are in these parts, and it's really what makes it so fanciful. You know, these parts come out like injection molded parts with the bosses and nuts and studs already in it. And, you know, we're ready to attach whatever we want to it.
So then going off last part 2, they can't move those suspension mounts because there's a place for them already. That's what I was saying last time, and he's confirmed that they would have to be moving the suspension mounts off the place that's designed to mount them.
So the reason that they asked that question was, let's say APTERA, you know, your APTERA gets into a fender bender and you have some body damage. Is there some way to like take the bonding off so you can replace the panel? Like, how would that work? How does repairing the body structure work?
I don't know if you ever remember a company called Saturn.
Yeah.
They commercials years ago where, you know, they would run stuff into the side of the car, hit it with a sledgehammer, and everyone's, oh, these doors are so strong. You know, that was really the first use of fiberglass SMC. Flash forward 20 years on Saturn, let's go, but 20 years forward, and the technology is so much better nowadays. But I mean, you could hit the APTERA with a sledgehammer. You could run as many shopping carts into it as you want. You can hit it with as many basketballs and softballs as you want. You know, it's not something that's going to damage the APTERA. But in extreme cases, you would have the ability to cut back a part, you know, shave down the bonding surface and rebond a part if you really had to. And that you can do in the field, but most of the time, you know, you think of most automotive accidents and it's, you know, front 3/4 or rear 3/4 or full frontal, rear frontal. In those cases, if you had to replace a full quarter of a combustion vehicle, traditionally, you know, you'd probably end up getting a whole new body structure for the APTERA.
Or they were just totaled out.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been a lot of surprisingly mild accidents of people I know who've had their vehicle just totaled. So we hope not to be that bad.
Right.
Other than standard convention.
Well,
you look
you know,
at a structure that's only a few $1,000s and a few hundred pounds, and you could actually ship a whole new body structure to somebody and have them, you know, take the old APTERA parts and put it on the new APTERA body pretty easily. So it's a different way to think about, you know, how to take care of those accidents and repairs than traditionally.
So did I hear correctly that you said that the body structure is about a few $1,000s?
Yeah, the main body structure, and then you have the front assembly, you got the node, you got the other stuff. So
okay,
replacing stuff on the APTERA, it's not like how you would replace stuff on a traditional automobile.
Right, because there's one of these EV companies that, like, there's been some news stories about getting minor fender benders in the quarter panel, and it costs like $50,000 to do the repair on that. I don't know if you've seen that news story.
Yeah. I've got a Tesla Model Y, and I had a delivery truck, left its lift gate down and like cut through the back of my vehicle, but they're probably going to total the vehicle because it's so much damage. If you damage too many components on a steel or aluminum body, it's really hard to recover from because labor is so expensive. But that's not how the APTERA is built. The APTERA is built with subassemblies, and it's just a much different way to think about repair and service. And
If you only had 3 wheels, that thing would have never hit your rear wheel.
exactly,
Yeah.
if I only had the APTERA, probably
Yeah,
wouldn't
and it's lower in the back.
Yeah.
So a lot of people have been asking. We have not heard much from Alafe in like a year or something. Like, is there any news on that front?
Yeah, I mean, Alafe is was our chosen partner, for powertrain development. And we've been working with them since the beginning. We've got a production motor design with them. And we've got prototype inverters that we've designed. But we're always looking to lower the risk and lower the cost of development. And we were looking at it still a significant burden internally to develop the inverter to a production level status compared to the inverters that we had, the sort of rep one. And we wanted to make sure that we could offer something at production that was, very low risk, that was easily attainable, and didn't require further development. And so we've been working with one company and have other backups as well, so that we're able to continue development with Alafe and ensure that anything that we do with them is ready by the time we launch it.
I'm going to stop here because this is all just BS again. Alafe was a development company that didn't have a manufacturing plant. They don't manufacture anything. They just invent and develop motors. APTERA doesn't have anybody, not even Alafe, making motors for them. They're not going to be ready in a couple of months with a single motor. And in fact, when they made the Gamma, they stopped showing the 3 alphas and the beta all running around behind them like they used to do. When it was the beta, the 3 alphas were always moving around behind them. For example, at Chakwalla. And I was telling people, when you go to APTERA Motors, make sure you have a close look and see if the 3 APTERAs have all their motors still in them, or whether the Gamma actually robbed them from a motor or two to get the Gamma. I think they are really short on motors, and this is a possibility. It doesn't matter if it's not true. It doesn't matter if they got every motor and they can drive the APTERAs, the alphas around just the same. But I reckon they're so skinflint and don't have enough motors that they had to stop driving all the alphas together behind the Gamma. Nobody did that check, and I've made many a suggestion to check things, and all the airhead fanboys that ever go and visit APTERA, they look at an empty warehouse and they've got nothing in their head that asks anything that finds the truth about what's going on. They're just overwhelmed by the snake oil that they can't think for themselves. They can't preempt what they're going to ask at all. This is not just with how many motors are available, but with many other things that I've suggested they go and inspect and check to see if these things are there. They've had contracts with suppliers for over 2 years now, and yet those suppliers in 2 years have not ever provided even a small amount of supplies to make the 16 PI builds that they intend to make. Not even a small amount. So it doesn't matter whether it's wiring harnesses or the Alafe motors or anything. They're just not there. Cherry, they had contracts with Cherry for ages. For what? We don't know. But what Cherry supplies are there? Nothing. The factory is still pretty much an empty warehouse. And when it comes down to the Alafe motors, there is no manufacturer in the world anywhere. And they've known that since they first visited Alafe in Slovenia. They've known it, that there's no factory. So they should have been getting a factory producing these things, but they've done nothing. And this is because they don't ever intend to sell anyone one of these scam trikes. They don't intend to. So why get the factory up and running?
but also with the provision that we want to be able to launch with something that is more readily available, more mature, higher installed base. It gives us time to do the other part properly.
Okay. So I just want to, there are a few questions that are just kind of rapid fire questions that people had. Is belly cooling still a thing?
Belly cooling is part of an overall package and it improves efficiency tremendously.
Mhm.
We've proven it, in bench tests in the lab, but it still requires further development to make it in production. So what we're doing in production is we have a small heat exchanger instead of the belly cooler.
This is what I've been saying. This proves that I was right all along. I said the belly pan would not work. It would not transfer cool air enough to the heat exchanger that is sitting what used to be both over and under the battery pack, but now it's only over the battery pack. But in any case, to abandon any belly cooling, and I know why they do this, it's because they have to have it too thin to be safe. In other words, it's so thin that the first rock that flies up will go straight through it and into the bottom of the battery pack. But whatever the reason, they know that there isn't sufficient cool air coming through to cool the plate, and that plate, with liquid coolant flowing around it and through it, that plate has to take cool air from somewhere. That's what heat exchangers do. Now, if they're putting a heat exchanger inside this body that they say is like a thermos, it retains its heat or cool depending on the temperature. If it's like a thermos, then a heat exchanger inside it is ineffective, totally ineffective, because the heat exchanger has to have access to cool air around it, and it will just stew in its own heat as it gets hotter and hotter. It just has to draw from its own hot air to try and cool the batteries that are heating it more and more and more. So it's all heat going in, no cooling going in to compensate. The only place that they have to get cool air in is under the windshield. And if you look at the Pininfarina wind tunnel test and watch the smoky airflow going over it, you will find that none of it goes down into the inside of the silly trike. None of it. It flows beautifully over the top, over the nose cone, and then keeps going straight over the gap and over the windshield, over the roof, and out the back. This is why they designed it that way. They don't want air that is being stopped because that creates resistance. That in turn means that it can't have all those efficiencies. The fuel efficiencies can't occur. They have to keep the air from going inside the body and providing some resistive force. And even going into that little windshield gap and around a heat exchanger will provide resistive force. And so they're saying they're doing something, but it's impossible to do. Not without the radiator that they use on a beta. The normal radiator system works. This idea is a crock. Now they're trying to explain it again, and it still doesn't make sense. So what we had first was a cartoon, and the cartoon was an absolute joke. I made a video that showed how ridiculous that cartoon was, that the skin cooling was not going to work. The second thing they did was have their sacked Daniel Morris explain on a test bed how it worked, and they made a little modification at that. But once again, I made a video about that, and it was ridiculous. It still was very Mickey Mouse. It's something that not even a Year 10 science project student would try to pass off. And now they're asked about the belly pan, and they're going, oh, well, the first 5,000, is it? Our launch edition models, they're not even going to have this belly pan system. They're going to have a heat exchanger that's locked inside and will stew in its own heat and not cool anything. This thing is bound to thermal throttle every 10 minutes. It has no way of effectively cooling itself. The internal heat exchanger will not work any different from the ridiculous idea of the belly pan. This is why I wanted to do this video.
And then at some point, so many months after production, when we figured out how to productionize a high volume belly pan, then that'll be kind of swapped in service. So like you've seen maybe with some other companies, we're not bound by some convention of saying we're going to have different releases every year, only on the year. We're going to bring software, hardware, firmware updates to the vehicle as they happen after they're.
He's changing the subject now. He's gone away from trying to convince us this heat exchanger is going to work and then just saying, well, you're not getting this with the 5,000 launch edition vehicles, but we can update it later.
They're tested and vetted, of course. But we can do that because we own virtually all the software and firmware stacks. And so we expect to bring in belly cooling, as soon as it's producible in mass volume.
Okay.
Tooling is expensive.
Yeah.
So that's one deterrent.
Okay. And so you're designing the vehicle in a way that, like, a year down the line, someone that has a launch edition vehicle could swap it out fairly easily.
I don't know if it's going to be fairly easily. Our goal is to make everything upwards compatible as possible.
This makes a mockery of what Bruce N. Nelson, or Bruce Baby as I call him, was always saying was they're taking this long time because they want to get it right when it first comes out. Well, think about it. Is leaving most of the things off it, getting it right, is giving you half of what you thought you were buying. Is that even ethical? And then saying, down the track, we'll give you this when we perfected it, and a bit later, if we've got something else, we'll give it to you. You can look forward to this vehicle getting better over maybe the space of 10 years, but just suck it up and live with it as it is until we're ready.
With solar panels, et cetera. And we'll do everything within our power to make that the case. But I can't necessarily sit here and represent that it would be super easy for them to upgrade that, although that would be our intention.
I see.
About maybe our openness is I think people will have a lot more information about APTERA and how it evolves versus other, new vehicles out there. We'll tell people what the parts are, how they work, how to replace them, which other companies would keep kind of close to their vest.
Okay, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, will that be in the launch edition or not?
We've been working to integrate Apple CarPlay into our own DCU, our own computer system. I don't believe we will have gone through Apple's 9-month certification process before that gets into launch. So most likely launch vehicles will not have Apple CarPlay.
And think about this one. 4 years ago, they could have arranged with Apple and waited the 9 months that Apple requires. And they'd have been ready more than 3 years ago. They could have 3 years ago done the same thing and been ready more than 2 years ago. 2 years ago, they could have done this, just got a little prepared, and they'd have been ready more than a year ago. Last year, they could have done it, and they'd have been ready 3 months ago. They're saying we're not even doing it now, and we won't do it because we don't have the 9 months to wait. They could have done it 4 times over. How thick are they? And I recall them saying, we're getting all these things done, and we don't need to do the screen until last because it's quick and easy to do. Well, how can they say it was quick and easy to do if they knew they had a 9-month wait period for some part of the screen, the Apple CarPlay? These guys have been lying to us. They're saying we're doing the screen last because it's so quick and easy. They knew that they couldn't get Apple CarPlay in there. They knew about the 9 months. They knew about it 4 years ago. And they've been saying, screen last, it's quick and easy. They had to lie to do that. And once again, I hark back to the very fact that they don't care whether Apple CarPlay is going to be in there because they never intend to sell one to anyone. Why pay Apple CarPlay and wait 9 months for the paperwork to get through when they know if nobody buys a car, nobody needs Apple CarPlay?
They will have some form of Bluetooth streaming, but the team, and from a design perspective, engineering perspective, have chosen Apple CarPlay. We understand the roadmap of what it takes to get those chipsets approved to be used by Apple, but I don't believe we will have done that by launch time.
Okay, all right. Is there thought of having like a life cycle environmental footprint analysis for the APTERA released?
Yes, I know Sarah's been working with the company to talk about that. But until we have, the full production vehicle and our supply agreement signed, it's hard to tell where the raw materials came from and, do all the analysis. But, we have a company on tap to actually, analyze the vehicle, kind of well to wheel.
Okay. And then
Sarah Hardwick hasn't been working for them since last November, as far as reports go. So how's she still working on this? And didn't that tracking program they have that says we can tell you what part was made and when, and we've got serial numbers on them and all of this? Why isn't that tracking program just tweaked a little bit to look at the carbon footprint of every part that's made as well? Wouldn't take much. They've got the big software program there, or so they say. But I think you'll find all these massive software programs they brag about are free.
My last question is, as you guys mentioned, the equity markets have been terrible for EV stocks. Like they've gone down like 90%. Any EV company that's not named Tesla has gone down 90%. And Tesla's actually falling a little bit lately too. Given that, do you think that Aptera's pre-IPO valuation should be adjusted?
Adjust it up, maybe?
Yeah, we've seen the turmoil in the markets for sure, but you know, we're entering into a whole new market segment here, and you know we have $1.7 billion in orders. We've created some pretty amazing technologies, you know, intellectual property portfolio here, and you know the potential for us long term, we think is just amazing. You know, as we start to discuss IPOs more, you know, and we start to really develop a plan that ties with production, you know, who knows what those valuation conversations will evolve. But we think we're very fairly valued now, and we think there's lots of potential as we grow.
I mean, when you look at energy historically, you know, from centuries ago till today, it's always been fraught with chaos, more and more so. And now you have, of course, this war in Ukraine and instability in the Middle East, and that brings chaos to everybody. But the one thing that remains constant is Aptera's ability to provide its own energy, its own range. And that's what people will increasingly be looking for, is to, you know, how to skip over that chaos, how to not integrate that chaos into their lives by having a not only a product, but a company dedicated to producing its vehicles that drive on the sun.
I see.
With that, you're not only buying a vehicle company, you're buying a solar company, a battery company,
Right.
an energy company. It's like displacing, you know, all these different industries in one. We're pretty proud of what the team.
This is what they said about the APTERA itself. They made it the Swiss Army knife of vehicles. It could do everything. It could camp. It could go long distances, road trip. It could commute. It could be a sports car. It was the Swiss Army knife. It was capable of doing everything. Now he's just translated that into the company and saying, you're buying into this company, that company, another company. It's all rubbish. It's all nonsense. He's sweet talking the gullible.
That's accomplished here, and we can't wait to deliver our first vehicles.
Yeah, we can't wait either.
I know.
All right. Well, thank you very much, guys. I don't want to take up too much of an evening. Yeah, I'm excited to come by and see it when you guys have the PI vehicle, hopefully by this summer. That the one that has all the production parts in it.
Poor old Cretin. He was booked in probably 5 or 6 months ago to visit the factory, and they put him off. And you would think this guy that they say is probably their best ambassador, you would think he would be in there pretty quickly and being shown everything. But no, they're putting him off, and they're continuing to put him off indefinitely. All the time he still thinks they're transparent, and so do all the gullible fanboys. These guys are not transparent.
That's our goal. We'd love to have that for you.
We're excited, you know, to watch your videos, and we're amazed by the amount of feedback you're able to get for us. So keep doing what you're doing. We're super impressed by your channel and the growth, and can't wait to see what you got in store for us next.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay, wow, I realize I say like a lot, and I'm a pretty awkward interviewer, but hopefully that was some useful information for you guys. I really appreciate Chris and Steve sitting down with us. Thanks for watching, guys.
Well, once again, that's all from me. Bye for now. Stay safe.